deal that Bambi Boots and Randy Rogers were employees of High Class Entertainment. Because the details of their work, the work that they agreed to do for High Class Entertainment, were controlled. Details as small as the sequins they were required to wear on their uniforms. Bambi Boots and Randy Rogers were entertainers. They worked for a club called Bottoms Up. Bottoms Up is a club owned by the entertainment company High Class Entertainment, the defendant in this case. Bambi Boots and Randy Rogers, let's put it simply, they're strippers, not strippers. But as workers, as employees, they are entitled by law to a fair minimum wage. And they are entitled by law to have uniform costs that they were required to bear, to be reimbursed by their employer. My name is Caroline Bordelon, and along with my co-counsel Peter Lopez, we represent the plaintiffs in this case today, Ms. Bambi Boots and Mr. Randy Rogers. Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about Miss Bambi Boots. After graduating from high school, Bambi Boots went to community college. After a year of community college, she decided to get a job, working at ABC Corporation. But Bambi's dream was to work in the fashion industry. So she enrolled herself at North State College and decided to take a job at a place called Jagged Productions, a place that focused on fashion production, fashion merchandising. But Bambi struggled to make ends meet. She struggled to pay the bills, and she struggled to pay for school. So with no experience ever working in a club like Bottoms Up, no experience ever going to a club like Bottoms Up, she happened to walk by and sees a sign, dancers wanted, and checks it out. Comes back the next day, and after an audition, with no skill and no experience, is hired. Similar story for Randy Rogers. Randy, at 19, had to drop out of school. He did earn his high school diploma, but Randy had to support himself. So he, like Bambi, took small jobs, working as a server in a nightclub, but eventually working as a stripper in a smaller club. Randy had some experience when he auditioned at Bottoms Up, but was hired immediately. And he'll tell you that when he auditioned at Bottoms Up, it was an easy one. He just had to take off his clothes, and they wanted to see his body. Both Randy and Bambi will tell you that once they got hired at Bottoms Up, that the conduct of their work was controlled. First, they're going to tell you that their schedules were controlled. They're each going to tell you that they had to make a schedule that had to be approved by Bottoms Up management. They're each going to tell you that on that schedule they had to work. They were required to work either a Monday or a Saturday. They're each going to tell you that there were times that they were required to be at work, and that when they got to work they had to sign in. And they're each going to tell you that when they got to work, there were times when they were required to stay, times which they couldn't leave before. Randy, in fact, is going to tell you that if you left before, okay, they're both going to tell you that if they, for some reason, messed in their schedule. Okay, fine. Bambi Boots is going to tell you that if she failed to come into work at the right time, there could be a fine. And Rogers is going to tell you that if you didn't show up when you needed to show up, you weren't allowed to work. After they set their schedules, the conduct of their work was also controlled on the floor of Bottoms Up. You'll hear from Bambi Booth exactly how they did their work. You'll hear from her that there were 3 options. One, that every dancer was required to dance on stage. That the only way they could make money when they danced on stage was through tips. She's also going to tell you that they could pay a fee to not dance on stage. And once that fee was paid, the dancers were free to make money in 2 other ways. The second way they could make money was in a private, one-on-one dance, a lap dance. A dance with a customer on the floor of Bottoms Up. For that dance, the customer had to pay a fee. That fee, you'll hear, went directly to Bottoms Up. In a private dance, the dancer could only make money through tips. And Bambi Booth will also tell you about the third way she could make money. In a champagne room, a private room. Like a private dance, a champagne room, there was a set fee. A percentage of that fee did go to the dancer, but a percentage of that fee went directly to the defendant, high class and everything. And again, the dancers could make money through tips. But you also hear from Bambi and Randy that any money they got in through tips, that wasn't theirs to keep. Because every night they were required to pay a house fee. You'll hear that that house fee changed. On busier nights, it would be higher, as high as $56 a night. And on slower nights, it would be lower. You'll see an example of a $50 house fee that every night they had to pay. And you'll hear from Randy the consequence of not paying that house fee. He wouldn't be allowed to work. Now, in addition to that house fee, the dancers had to pay tip out every night. You'll hear from Bambi that they had to pay the DJ. They had to pay hair and makeup. They had to pay, if they used a champagne room, the host for the champagne room. And they had to pay the house supervisor. The house supervisor at Bottoms Up is a woman named Kelly Porter, who you'll hear from today. In Kelly Porter's testimony, she'll admit that every night she required the dancers to pay her a house fee and to pay her for tip out. You also hear from Randy that they were required to tip out the bartender. Now, the money that the dancers could make were in tips. But you'll hear that that tip money had to be paid back to Bottoms Up. You'll hear that this is important because in this case, both Bambi and Randy will testify that there were nights that they did not make the legal minimum wage. In fact, Randy will get up here and tell you that there was an entire week that for every hour he worked, he failed to make minimum wage. Bambi and Randy's conduct was also controlled in what they were required to wear. You'll hear Bambi get up and give testimony about the gown she was required to wear. That the gowns had to have sequins, they had to be gaudy, they had to be sparkly. That on other nights she was required to wear sexy lingerie. And that every night she was required to wear shoes that fit a certain standard. See-through platforms with a certain inch heel. You also hear from Randy about the details of his uniform that were controlled. That on nights he was required to wear tuxedos with cuffs and bow ties, and that those tuxedos had to also be gaudy. They had to contain studs or sequins. And you'll hear from both Bambi and Randy that their outfits had to be approved, had to be okayed for them to perform at Bottoms Up. If they weren't approved, they couldn't work. Now, you'll hear why these uniforms are important. Not only will they demonstrate that Bambi and Randy were employees of high-class entertainment, but you'll hear that both Bambi and Randy bought these uniforms with money out of their own pockets, and that high-class entertainment did not reimburse them for those costs. So, at the end of the trial, ladies and gentlemen, my co-counsel Peter Wilson will come before you and ask that you find for three different things. One, he's going to ask that you find that the plaintiff, Mrs. Booth and Mr. Rogers, were employees of high-class entertainment. And because they were employees, we're going to ask you to find the second thing, that they were entitled by law to have a minimum wage paid to them. And that the evidence here shows that they weren't paid a minimum wage. And third, he's going to ask that you find that they weren't reimbursed for the uniform they were required to wear. And because of that, high class should give them awesome. So I'm confident that you will find that they are employees, that they weren't paid a minimum wage, and that they weren't reimbursed for the uniform. Remember, the devil in this case is in those details. Each of the details that were highly controlled by high class entertainment. Thank you.